Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, a mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in.
Welcome into another episode of the podcast. Oh my gosh, friends, I am so excited to continue what we talked about last week, which is the scale of integration, was what we talked about last week. And now this week, I'm going to be talking about working that scale using internal family systems. So I often will say, oh, maybe you heard me talk about this a little bit a few weeks ago, but it doesn't really matter if you listen to that podcast or not. This is one podcast where I'm going to say, I think you're probably going to enjoy this episode more if you first go back and listen to last week's episode. So I encourage you to do that, and I'll be right here for you when you get back. Okay. So last week, you heard me talk about the scale of integration. Where are we in terms of our personal development? Are we super rigidly attached and almost like imprisoned by our personalities? Or are we holding that personality more loosely, have access to it and use it as a tool? But really, our stronger connection is to our higher self. The Enneagram will call that your essential nature, all of those things. Where are you on that spectrum? And nobody lives at one place on that spectrum all the time. We sort of have an area that we tend to hang out in. And then we also have specific situations that we are more or less uh, integrated around. And so we don't, maybe we might not even hang out at our sort of typical area that we normally live at in the scale. And last week I gave you the example of the place I'm at right now with my kiddo who is not back in school yet, and 1 gajillion% just a giant monkey wrench in a colossal amount of work that I have to get done. I have all magical, wonderful things happening for me in the next couple of months. None of them I would trade for the world. And all of them combined mean that I will only be here in my office working like a normal person for 3 of the next like 7 weeks. So I really need to get stuff done right now. And I am really getting frustrated with my 11-year-old who wants me to take him to the skate park and wants me to read a book with him and wants me to watch him on his skateboard and wants me to watch this cool paper airplane that he made and wants me to text all of his friends and organize a play date and have his friends come over here and all the things that a kid does when they're on summer break. And especially an 11-year-old kid who can't understand that his mom doesn't have a summer break and that actually wants to hang out with his mom, which it won't be the case in the next 3, 4, 5 years. And it is driving me insane, y'all. So I talked last week about how, when I'm in a really high state of consciousness, I have, that connection to my higher self, my essential nature, and I am really in charge of how I respond to my kid. Like me, self is in charge. I can make that decision from what internal family systems calls self energy. I can look at my little baby boy. He's not a baby anymore, but that's how I think about him. And I can say, I will get all this work done because that's my essential nature. The truth is that this work will get done because I am a kind of person who everything comes together. I bring my diligence to it and it just happens. So, all of this like trying and striving and saying no and being frustrated is completely unnecessary. I will achieve all of my goals. That's just kind of who I am. So, I don't need to stress, and I will get time to get all of that stuff done once, school does start up again, which is going to happen in a few days. And so it's completely fine when I'm assessing of the situation is that my kid needs something from me, and That's my higher value. And so that's what I'm going to do in this moment. That's how I normally respond to my children. But I'm a little bit off my game right now because I have a part of me that's like, I have so much to get done. This isn't a normal amount of stuff to get done. And I have so limited time. And the only way to get this stuff actually done is to be extremely diligent and just freaking lock in. And any parent knows that locking in is not really an option when you are simultaneously parenting. That's not a thing. So that is sort of my struggle that I'm experiencing right now. And I thought it would be a really great experience to walk you through how I'm using internal family systems to navigate this struggle that I have and to maintain access to self energy, even though I have all of this other sort of static noise that's trying to get in the way. And the way that I am doing that right now essentially is internal family system. So this is another podcast that if you've listened to my previous podcast about internal family systems, you already know a little bit about it. But I would say it's not necessary that you go back and listen to previous IFS podcasts because I think that even if you don't know all the right words and the layout of the system, you are going to understand it just from listening to this example. So just really, really, really fundamental basics of IFS. IFS basically says just like a family is a system or an organization is a system, and the different people in that system play different roles and they all interact with each other and et cetera, to work to get this like whole, whether the whole is a family or the whole is the organization or whatever, from point A to point B. Our our personhood, like our bodies or each individual person, also has an internal system that works much the same as a system like a family works. We have all these different parts of ourselves. They all play different roles. They interact with each other, and they're all working for the success of the whole, which is the person. And sometimes the strategies that they put forth, um, even though they're intended to be for the benefit of the whole, they actually wind up being counterproductive. So, for example, let's say you have a part of yourself that plays like this inner critic and tells you when you're doing the wrong thing. Well, the intention of that strategy and that part is to help you, right? It's to help make sure that you do the right thing and you stay on track and you don't go astray. And all those things are wonderful things. And it has such a benevolent intent, that part. But we also know that sometimes an inner critic can be a torture device because we beat ourselves up. We're too hard on ourselves. We can't accept it when we make mistakes or that we have flaws. We become perfectionistic, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a really great example of a super common part. Most people have an inner critic, and you can see how that part has a benevolent intent, but sometimes can show up in a way that's a little bit too extreme and actually winds up harming the whole instead of helping the whole. So that's kind of what IFS says. And the other important thing that IFS says is that we all have a self that is separate from our parts. It's that essential nature that the Enneagram talks about. We have this self, capital S, and self is an adult. Self is capable of leading all of these parts and making this system work in harmony and balance and all of those things. And when we are connected to self, we have all of this heightened state of consciousness, agency, choice. We still utilize all of the amazing strategies that our parts have to offer us because we choose them, not because they take us over, if that makes sense. So let's look at this situation that I'm in with my littlest kiddo. So what am I doing to try to stay connected with self and not kind of slip down, down, down that integration scale that the Enneagram teaches us about? Well, I'm talking to my parts. That's what I'm doing every morning. Before I get out of bed, I do a 10-minute meditation and I just kind of do a body scan and I kind of just check like, okay, what parts are there? What do I need to hear from you? Like where do we need to go today? And how do we want to show up? And every morning, now I'm an Enneagram type 1, so this part is a really big piece of my, in my arsenal. I rely on it a ton, and usually it is just nothing but a benefit to me. It's just, this is why I know that I will get all my stuff done. And because normally when this part is not like triggered and in a reactive state, it's just running in the background all of the time and just doing me so much service. And it's my workhorse part. When I listen to it, it talks all about all the stuff that I have to get done, but not in a stressed out way, in a really, really excited way. We're going to record some podcasts. We're going to write some emails. I've got a bunch of scarves I'm knitting because I'm giving them away as gifts on the retreat that's coming up. Just listing off all of the amazing things that I get to do, and I really do feel that way. And my workhorse is the one that helps me execute all of that stuff. And even right now, as I'm talking to you about my workhorse, it is like inside me going, I'm so special, and sees me, and I can feel it. It's like a little flutter in my stomach, and just really that feeling of like recognition. And we are just such a good team, me and my workhorse part. And right now, my workhorse part is not only excited. Right now, my workhorse part is also has a sense of urgency. It's not just we get to do all of these things, it's we have to do it, and we're not going to get it done in time unless we are rushing, unless we put everything else to the side. And the workhorse part really just wants to be 100% in charge right now instead of being one of the amazing pieces of this amazing puzzle that I put together every day to be me. And so I have to actually have a dialogue with that part. I have to love it. I have to help it feel seen and heard like it does right now in my tummy being the star of today's podcast show. And I have to figure out ways to help it relax, not just tell it to relax. Because what the crazy thing about IFS is even though self is the leadership, self leads at the permission of parts. So if my workhorse part doesn't give me permission to be in the leadership role, I can't be. And in order for me to get that permission from my part, I need to sit and love it and care for it and get curious about it. And it needs to feel seen and heard. And I need to listen to it. And sometimes I need to say things like, well, what do you need today to feel more relaxed and like just excited, not urgent? And it might say, well, can you just make sure that you like just record 2 podcast episodes right now so that we can be more relaxed about everything else we're doing the rest of the day. And I can say, you know what? I actually absolutely can do that. In fact, I'm going to get up and do it right now. I'm not going to do my hair. I'm going to wear my sweatshirt that I had on from the gym this morning, like all that stuff, which is, if you're watching the video, is exactly what you'll see in the visual for today. Because that is something that will help that workhorse feel honored and listened to and have more ability to stay relaxed and excited instead of urgent and scared. So this is a really great example of IFS. A couple things I want to point out that are like maybe getting down into maybe a deeper level with this stuff. One of the reasons why I'm able to do this is because, well, first of all, I'm doing my meditation practice, but part of my meditation practice is feeling my body because our parts show up. They live inside us and they show up physically for us. Not all the time, but a lot of times. So if you have like an achy back or a sore knee, and it's not because you fell and skinned your knee on the sidewalk yesterday, but those are often our parts talking to us and kind of like a little tug on the sleeve or a tap on the shoulder saying, hey, I have a message for you. Can you give me some attention? And if you do, you might be surprised what you hear. So I'm going to go like maybe one tick deeper into IFS, and then I'm going to bring it back around to the Enneagram for you. So what we do when we are working with our parts is we first like do that kind of scan. It doesn't necessarily have to be in your body, but just to kind of sit quietly and just kind of like listen or notice, like, is there a message in your head that's kind of replaying itself? Is there a physical feeling in your body? Is there an emotion that is just like overwhelming you right now? And understand that all of those things, whatever one, kind of pops out to you, it's a part. And so we just notice it. We just notice that part. I notice that I feel anxious, for example, or I notice a constriction in my chest, or I notice, um, whatever, uh, just overwhelming sadness. Maybe I'm feeling sad or whatever it is. I just notice it and I feel it. And then I start to ask myself, how do I feel toward it? Which is kind of a wacky question, but it makes a big difference. It's not how do you feel about it, and it's not how does it feel to you, but how do you feel toward that? So, how do I feel toward the tightening in my chest? How do I feel toward the sadness that I've been carrying around? How do I feel toward that pit in my stomach? And kind of just sit with that and wait, just wait and see as you're kind of checking in and seeing how you feel toward that part. If any of those characteristics of self energy or your essential nature are present. So remember that, like with the Enneagram, we talk about your essential nature when you're in that higher state of consciousness. The way that that feels is really that you're present beyond the constraints of your personality, that you're not driven by your fears or reactive emotions. You're just much more in a state of agency. Um, IFS takes that even further and says when we're in self energy, we feel some C's. So there's 8 C's in IFS. And let's see if I can remember them all off the top of my head. Let's see. Courage, compassion, connectedness, creativity, calm. That's 5. Curiosity, compassion, and clarity. Holy cow, I did it. So we kind of check in when I say to you or when you say to yourself, how do I feel toward that pit in my stomach? Is there any feeling of curiosity, like, wow, where's this pit in my stomach coming from? Or compassion, like, oh, I don't know much about you yet, part, but I feel so sad and empathetic to the fact that you are feeling this way right now. Is there some calmness, like this is how I feel, and I'm not upset about it. I'm not freaking out. There's no urgency about it. It's just I notice I have a pit in my stomach right now. And I'm pretty calm about that, even though, you know, I know that it's a part and it's a part that needs my attention and all that stuff. I'm not upset. I'm calm, right? Or it could be that sort of connectedness, like, oh, I just feel so connected to that part of me that is anxious right now. And I get it, like I just feel that connection to that part. And if you're feeling one of those C's towards it, that's amazing because now you have 2 things inside of you. You have yourself, you have that C, self energy, and you have the part that whatever it is that you've noticed, that emotion or the thought or the feeling in your body, you have what's called an IFS unblended from your part so that you now have 2 things that can look at each other. You have self that can look at the part, and you have part that can receive from the self. And now you can really listen and ask your part, what does it want you to know? Why does it feel the way that it feels? What would help it relax? What's its job, and what's it afraid might happen if it didn't do its job? All of these things that you can kind of feel as you get better and better at feeling self energy and differentiating that from when you're kind of blended with your parts. And as you get better at actually talking to your parts and listening to your parts, you really can kind of feel your part relax. And oftentimes, especially when it starts with a physical sensation, I will feel, or when my clients do this with me, they will feel like a lessening, like, oh, the pit in my stomach, it's kind of like fading away. Well, that makes perfect sense. This part has been trying to get your attention and now it has your attention. So there's not a need to give you that queasy feeling. You're paying attention now, which is lovely. So that's what I'm kind of doing in the morning when I listen, when I do my like 10 minutes, I'm listening. And then what's really great is the more time you spend connected to yourself um and checking in with your system, with all your little parts, the more you can notice throughout the day, like, oh, there is a part of me that just wants Sky to go and entertain himself right now so that I can get some work done. I can feel it in my body. I can feel this thing rising up in me. And I can identify that it's not really myself. It's not my essential nature. It's a part. And I can actually just shoot a little love bomb to that part a little bit and calm down. Now, is it working perfectly all the time? No, of course not. I just told you in the beginning of this episode that there is a part of me that is really creating a lot of frustration inside of me because I have this mountain of work to do and a kiddo who's getting in the way of that. So no, of course it's not working entirely perfectly. But have I screamed at Sky in the last week and a half while I've been feeling this frustration? Have I completely ignored him? Have I slammed the door in his face? Have I lectured him or punished him for interrupting me? No, I haven't done any of that stuff because I at least have some connection to self. I at least have access to that sun that gets covered up by the clouds sometimes, which are our parts. I would say it's partly cloudy. It's not fully cloudy, if that makes sense. And as we do this work, we get better and better and better. There's a saying in IFS, which is self begets self and parts beget parts. So if I show up as my true self with Sky, I'm much more likely to interact with his true self. And if I show up as one of my parts, just being irritated and frustrated, then I'm likely to really just be interacting with one of his parts, the part that's like nagging and whining and begging me to pay attention to him instead of entertaining himself, the part of him that is, that feels sad and rejected when I can't play with him, et cetera, et cetera. So, it doesn't have to be perfect. It isn't perfect. It never will be perfect for it to be impactful and make a huge difference. And I can tell you from experience, because Sky's my fourth kid, which means this is not my first rodeo with end of summer antsiness and my workhorse part being like, hello, we need to get back to the grind, get these kids out of here. So I can tell you from experience that there have definitely been years in the past where my workhorse part really did take over and I did lose my temper with my kids. I did treat them poorly. I did fail to attune to them because I had no access to self in that time. I was very low on that Enneagram integration scale. So these are the ways that we can use IFS to work that integration scale of the Enneagram and just creep up. Now, this is a very specific example. Guess what? It works on a global scale as well. Like if you are doing work to heal old past wounds, maybe even parts that it's not a situation that's happening today, but it's a situation that has happened and you're not over it, and you use IFS to heal that stuff, like in a general global sense, your sort of baseline that I talked about in the beginning creeps up. When I started this stuff, when I started doing my own personal growth work, whatever, back 15-ish years ago, um, I would say my average place that I hung out was probably in that low average to darn right low range of integration. Very, very identified with my personality, extremely reactive, so quick to anger, so quick to condemn and blame everybody, and super rigid with myself. And I didn't see any other way to be. I was trapped by my type, like I said in last week's episode. Nowadays, my average place that I hang out in, I always have like, there's a part of me that really wants to ask my therapist, like, where do you think I hang out now on the integration scale? Because I have another part that really values honesty and wants to make sure that I'm not just blowing smoke up my own ass. But if I had to make my own estimation about where I hang out on the integration scale these days, I would say I probably hang out in the low end of high, if that makes sense. I'm not like a self actualized Buddha person, but I have a heightened awareness of my parts. I have a heightened awareness of self energy. I have a massive toolbox of skills that I can use to maintain that connection. And, um, and I show up most of the time with my kids in a pretty high state of consciousness. So that's a really great example of like doing this work. Like, okay, maybe this was just an example of like how I can keep not lose my temper with my kid for the next 3 days until he goes back to school. Well, is that like actual like personal evolution on a global scale? Well, heck yeah, it is. Because these little things that I'm doing where I'm examining myself, I'm connecting to my system, I'm understanding how my system works, I'm doing these little micro healing things to make sure that, that I am moving the eight ball a little bit. It all adds up. Like there's a reason why I'm in a different place on that scale now than I was 15 years ago. And it's because of little things like the one thing that I told you about today. So I hope that really lands with you. I hope that you're starting to see the connections between some of these things. One of the reasons I love doing the podcast is because I can kind of talk a little bit more long form about this stuff. And each podcast episode can kind of be a building block to give you a comprehensive picture of something that's quite complex. The Enneagram is extremely complex. And also, internal family systems is very, very complex. And the two working together is very, very complex. But if you listen to the podcast regularly, my hope is that your brain is sort of like weaving in all of these complex ideas into one big, beautiful puzzle that helps you feel some direction and some clarity about your own personal journey. And if that's the case, I would love to take it further than a podcast with you and talk to you about coaching. Think about what you want and what your path is to get there and how some of the things that we talk about on the podcast could apply to you. And let's see if we're a good fit. Set up that free discovery call that you hear me talk about every week, and we'll find out. Might be the only time we ever talk, or it might be the beginning of a magical, transformative coaching relationship. And the only way for us to know is to give it a try. So I hope to see your name pop up on my calendar, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.
The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/KaplanCall, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.